Test. Allez, Wilson pour le ground floor. 1, 2. Ça va? C'est parti. Ouais, canal anglais, le canal 2.
Good morning. I call to order meeting number 43 of the 78th session of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It is my great pleasure to welcome again this morning the distinguished delegation of the Netherlands, and the head of delegation, His Excellency Mr. Willem Hertz. I would also like to welcome all those observing the dialogue in person and through webcast. Excellency, I believe we owe you 10 minutes from yesterday. So I thought, and you had heard, the delegation has heard the questions under cluster three. We will, of course, have follow up questions on cluster three as well. But what we could do is we can first give the delegation to take the floor to respond to cluster one, two, three as well, and perhaps listen to questions from cluster four. That'll give you some time to formulate your responses. And if that's acceptable, and we'll keep displaying the timings available on the monitor here as well. So we could begin by first taking questions under cluster four. And if I may kindly request my colleague, Ms. Laura Krachinu-Tatu, to please pose her questions under cluster four. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and good morning to the distinguished delegation of the Netherlands. Um, as the chair has indicated, it is my task to address questions under cluster 4, articles 13, 14, and 15, the right to education and the right to take part in cultural life and to enjoy the benefits of scientific knowledge. And I will be having 4 issues under the right to educate, 4 big issues under the right to education and 4 under the right to take part in cultural life. And starting with the first, with the right to education, I would like to start by generally commending you for your achievements in the educational sector. According to the OECD report from 2025, the Netherlands is one of the best performers of the OECD countries, and not only in many of the indicators in the field of education at all levels, and also one of the most popular destinations for many international students who search for high quality higher education. Nevertheless, according to the same sources, as well as reports which were presented to the committee, several challenges continue to remain. And the aim today is to raise these challenges with your delegation and to see how they could be addressed in the future, or maybe they are already addressed. Most of the challenges that persist in accessing, attending, and graduating from different levels of education in the Netherlands are linked with the socioeconomic status, the ethnic origin, or the migration background of the respective pupils, students. And the same is valid for the right to take part in cultural life and to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its application. Yesterday, I have raised with your delegation a question on Article 1 of the Dutch Constitution, which regulates the principle of non-discrimination in access to fundamental rights and lists several grounds for non-discrimination. As mentioned yesterday, although this text was amended in 2023 and 2 distinct grounds were included, namely disability and sexual orientation, the socioeconomic background and the ethnic origin are still not explicitly mentioned in the constitutional provision as prohibited grounds for discrimination. In this context, I would like to recall that paragraphs 34 and 35 of our Committee General Comment on Non-Discrimination in the Enjoyment of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, adopted in 2009, provides some information in this regard. Going back to the issue of education, that question was also raised bearing in mind that most of the challenges that persist in accessing, attending and graduating from different levels of education in the Netherlands are linked with the socioeconomic status, the ethnic origin and the migration background of their respective pupils and students. So reports available indicate the existence of persistent gaps linked to these grounds: economic status, migration, and parental education children. Children of parents with low income are more likely to attend lower secondary tracks. Second, the increasing ethnic and socioeconomic segregation in primary and secondary schools. particularly in urban areas, and also linked with the residential segregation. Thirdly, teaching resources in the Caribbean Netherlands when compared to the European Netherlands, and also unequal access to digital learning resources, particularly for low-income families and students in the Caribbean Netherlands. So I have 4 questions here. Would it be possible to indicate what measures are in place to address the educational inequality and to reduce the persistent gaps faced by children from disadvantaged socioeconomic background, migration background, children with low parental education or parental low income, in accessing, attainment, and completion of different level of education at the same level with to their peers. Second, what measures are in place to address ethnic, socioeconomic, and residential segregation in primary, secondary education school, in particularly in urban areas? Third, what measures are in place to address the lower educational outcomes and the limited access to specialized teaching resources in the Caribbean and Netherlands? Fourth, what measures are in place to address the unequal access to digital learning resources, particularly for low-income families and students in the Caribbean Netherlands? My second issue refers to education for children with disabilities. And according to CRPD, which provided the Netherlands with a series of recommendations in respect of inclusive education, it looks like there is a insufficient implementation of these recommendations, and children with disabilities still face barriers in having access to mainstream education. So my question here is, please describe the measures that are in place to address the barrier faced by children with disabilities in accessing mainstream education, and how these measures are effectively tackling the issue of inclusive education for these children. The third issue refers to the teacher shortages and the high ratio of students per teacher. It's an indicator also from the OECD report, and this is linked to the quality of education. According to data provided, there are high vacancy rates for teachers in urban and rural school, which affects the quality and the continuity of education, and a high ratio of students per professor. So what measures are in place to address the teacher shortages and to lower the vacancy rates of teacher positions in both urban and rural schools? The last issue under the right to education refers to the citizenship education and the role of economic, social, and cultural rights within the framework of the citizenship education. So in August 2021, the Dutch government adopted an amendment to the national law on citizenship education, which aims, among other things, to strengthen the position of human rights and children's rights in the citizenship education. The process of formulating a new curriculum for primary and secondary school has been controversial, with some NGOs indicating the lack of transparency or involvement of a civil society in this process. So my questions here are there any updates on the implementation of this law and on the formulation of the new curriculum? Is this curriculum available now? Did the process for the formulation of the new curriculum on citizenship education for primary and secondary education included the participation of the civil society organizations? Would it be possible to provide details on the contents of the curriculum on citizenship education that refers to economic, social, and cultural rights? So if that's the case. Finally, on the last article, Article 15, I have 4 issues to raise, and because of the time constraints, I will just go to the questions. So my first question refers to access to cultural life. And the available data indicate that still exist economic barriers and geographic disparities that limit access and participation in cultural life, especially from persons from low income and rural communities. So here my question is, what measures are in place to address the economic and geographic disparities that limit the participation of low income and rural communities in cultural life? Second, available data indicate a limited institutional support for preserving and promoting local heritage, languages, and cultural practices, including in the Caribbean Netherlands. And my question is, what measures are in place to support and promote the local heritage, the languages, and the cultural practices of the population with distinct cultural characteristics in both the European and Caribbean Netherlands? Third, available data indicate that cultural subsidies disproportionately benefit institutions in larger cities, smaller community-based initiatives being underfunded, which results in a cultural funding gaps between these two categories. So what measures are in place to address these funding gaps? And fourthly and lastly, available data indicate the uneven distribution of research and innovation funding, as well as the lack of targeted programs to increase participation of women, migrants, marginalized groups in STEM fields, which hinders the access of persons belonging to these groups to science and technology. So my question is, what measures are in place to address the uneven distribution of research and innovation funding, and to increase the participation of women, migrants, and marginalized groups in STEM fields? Thank you very much.
Uh, Your Excellency, you've now got the questions of all the four clusters, but we could manage our time by first requesting the delegation to respond to questions that were posed under cluster 2, and you would have 20 minutes for that. And thereafter, you could take another 30 minutes to respond to questions under cluster 3. But of course, if there are questions left over from one as well, you're most welcome to use that time. This is just a question of time management, but really, uh, you and your delegation have the floor now to please respond to questions under cluster 1, 2, and 3. I would, of course, request the delegation to kindly speak in a concise manner and just be mindful of the interpreters, because a little, if it's spoken with too much speed, then there are problems. So, Your Excellency, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And it's good to be here again. We worked hard last night and this morning to try to answer the remaining questions of the dialogue we had yesterday. I know myself, I sometimes speak too quick, so I will try to be slow and ask my colleagues to be mindful of the interpreters as well. Our approach would be that we would now try to answer all the remaining questions in both cluster 1 and 2 combined, and after that we'll refer to the questions on cluster 3. And we would like to thank you and the cluster leader in advance for also giving us already the questions on cluster 4, so that we can better prepare for that. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague from Aruba on cluster 1 and 2.
Yes, with regards to the question posed on to provide a description on social security system in Aruba in broad lines, I would like to provide the following explanation. So, social security in Aruba can be divided in two categories. We have social assistance, which is tax payer funded, and it's administered by our Department of Social Affairs. It is basically, in effect, financial assistance that is given to individuals or families to cover necessary cost of living. So at the request, it's evaluated by the department, and then a decision is made to provide with the financial assistance. Under financial assistance, we can also include assistance for children, as well as assistance for individuals with disabilities. The other category, or the other component of our social security system, is we can call it social insurance. So in effect, which again can be divided in two groups. So we have a category that's national insurance. It's covered by everyone, we have a general medical insurance. We have insurance for orphans and widows, as well as general old age pensions. And we have the other category that is focused on employees. So there we also have a fund or insurance for sick leave. So if an employee becomes sick, or also maternity leave, then it's provided, the individuals is provided with the insurance, as well as with a moment, with for example, in case there are accidents, for example, on the workplace, as well as when if a person becomes unemployed, there is also an insurance that assists the individual during that period. So yeah, in broad outlines, these are the components of which the Aruban social security system consists of. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to introduce myself yesterday, so I will do that now. My name is Sanne Staaltjens, and I'm from the Dutch Ministry of the Interior and Kingdom Relations. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to speak to the questions about the protection of fundamental rights in the European Netherlands and the Caribbean Netherlands, the questions on discrimination, and the question on hate speech by politicians. On the topic of the level of protection on fundamental rights in the Kingdom, and especially the European and Caribbean Netherlands, I can share that the treaties concerning fundamental rights, such as the European Convention on Human Rights, but also the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, have long been applicable throughout the entire Kingdom. With regard to the already existing human rights treaties that have not yet been implemented in all parts of the Kingdom, the autonomous countries are working together to expedite this process by sharing knowledge and best practices. Several treaties have been prioritized by the countries, and the countries are now working together towards the full implementation of those treaties. Bonaire, Saba, and Sint Eustatius are considered public entities within the Netherlands. The government has been applying this comply and explain principle for some time now, which applies to both law and policy. This means that, in principle, no differentiation is made in new legislation between the European part of the Netherlands and the Caribbean part of the Netherlands. Non-compliance is possible, but it needs to be justified based on criteria. Then on to the questions on discrimination. A specific question was also posed on whether we intend to amend our legislation on discrimination by adding socioeconomic background and ethnic origin as explicit grounds for discrimination. The answer to that question is no, we do not currently intend to do so. As mentioned by the distinguished member of your committee, the right to non-discrimination has been codified through Article 1 of our Constitution. This right has been further implemented in national equality legislation. The General Act on Equality is the central piece of legislation in this respect. This act explicitly lists the grounds that are included in Article 1 of the Constitution. Ethnic origin is not listed as such, but the ground of race is included as a protected ground, and our NHRI interprets this ground quite broadly. So in practice, most of the NHRI's rulings on discrimination on the ground of race concern cases related to ethnic origin. Socioeconomic background is also currently not included as a protected ground. However, there are currently ongoing debates on this matter, and there is an upcoming study by the Dutch government on this matter in 2026. We were also asked to explain the landscape of organizations to which individuals who experience discrimination in the Netherlands can turn. In the Netherlands, people can report discrimination to local anti-discrimination services. These services register all reports and provide support and advice in an accessible way. 19 offices currently operate at the local and regional level, covering almost the whole country. The government is at this point preparing to strengthen the system by creating a single, central, and independent body with national branches. The police also handles discrimination cases. They register complaints, reports, and their own observations. If there is sufficient evidence of a criminal act, they may open an investigation. Our NHRI, of course, also plays a further role. It answers and records all questions and complaints about discrimination. It investigates cases under the equal treatment legislation, and hearings at the NHRI are free of charge and accessible without legal representation. Reports about online expressions can be made to the online discrimination reporting point. This body assesses whether content is unlawful, and if so, it asks website owners or platforms to remove the content. People can also submit complaints to the National Ombudsman. This office handles complaints about the central government, decentralized authorities, and executive bodies, including complaints about discrimination. The Children Ombudsman is another channel. People can raise complaints or ask for help if children's rights are at risk, including also complaints about discrimination. And then finally, victims of discrimination can take their case to court. The last question I will answer to at this moment is the question on actions and measures against hate speech targeting migrants by politicians. As a general point, I would like to mention that there are multiple laws and policies in place to counter hate crime and hate speech. A recent development that I would like to highlight is the introduction of a new Article 44 bis of the legal penal code, which entered into force the 1st of July of this year. This article introduces a legal basis for increasing the penalty by 1/3 for crimes that include a discriminatory aspect. Then more specifically, with regard to hate speech targeting migrants by politicians, it is important to stress that it is not the role of the Dutch government to determine whether a particular political statement constitutes hate speech and is of a criminal and discriminatory nature. This responsibility lies exclusively with the public prosecutor, and in principle, in case of a report involving criminal discrimination, both hate crime and hate speech, the prosecutor always initiates a case. I will now hand over to my colleague for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you. I will respond to the question from yesterday regarding cases before the national contact points. The Netherlands National Contact Points, NPC, operates independently from the Dutch government. In 2023, there were 14 pending notifications of company activities in different phases of resolution, including on freedom to join a trade union and transparency of company information. In 2024, there were 9 pending notifications, including on lack of a grievance mechanism and lack of stakeholder engagement. The National Action Plan Progress Report of 2024 announced a new measure to stimulate cooperation with NCP procedures by companies. To qualify for funding or any other form of support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, companies must meet these responsible business conduct conditions. If the national contact point receives a complaint about a company, companies that want to make use of trade instruments must report this and cooperate with the NCP. Thank you.
I'll address the questions related to trade agreements and in particular the UPOV Convention. Trade agreements are intended to and used to increase economic prosperity in all parties to the agreement. Modern agreements contain comprehensive chapters on trades and sustainable development intended to protect the climate, the environment, and ensure compliance with labor laws. Additionally, reference is made to instruments such as CEDAW and other UN conventions. Domestic advisory groups made up of civil society representatives are involved in monitoring, and dispute settlement mechanisms can be used by parties to address non-compliance with trade and sustainable development chapters. Specifically regarding the UPOV Convention, this has its mission to provide and promote an effective system of plant variety protection with the aim of encouraging the development of new varieties of plants benefiting global food security and sustainable agriculture. Membership is a sovereign right, and no country is pressured to become a UPOV member, certainly not by the Netherlands. Development of new plant varieties is a time-consuming process and takes a lot of investment, while copying a plant variety is fast and cheap. Without adequate protection of a newly developed variety, no breeder would invest in breeding improved plant varieties. Since the convention only protects newly developed varieties, it does not prevent farmers from using traditional varieties or varieties no longer covered by protection, even if the plant variety was in the past a protected variety. This treaty does not take anything away from farmers, it indeed gives them an extra choice.
Is it on? Yeah. So I will address the question from cluster 2 that was remaining about the demographic makeup of irregular migrants and asylum seekers and refugees, and also on data on the number of migrants of the labor market share. So I would like to highlight that very recently in July of this year, a very elaborate report was published on the current situation of migration in the Netherlands, including all kinds of data and statistics that also regard the demographic makeup of these groups. So it includes all kinds of fact sheets on asylum migration, labor migration, family migration, etc. So our suggestion would be to share the relevant fact sheets with you, because it would take a lot of time to go through it right now. So that would be our suggestion, if that's all right with you. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions. I will quickly answer a remaining question from yesterday. There was a question asked about whether migrant workers in an irregular situation or who are undocumented can go to court in order to enforce their rights. Yes, they can. They equally have access to court just as any other citizen or resident in the Netherlands. And it's important to mention that they can benefit from legal aid, and that is regulated by the Legal Aid Act. That's a small addition I want to give. I'd like to pass on the floor now.
Good morning. I'll address the questions on the disparity between Caribbean Netherlands and the EU Netherlands in social security and living standards. There is indeed a disparity between the Caribbean Netherlands and the EU Netherlands, and we are working on reaching a situation of equal provisions and standards in the Caribbean Netherlands, and it takes time, it's step by step. In 2022 and 2024, the government has provided a structural budget of 62 million euros in total, mainly to reduce poverty in the Caribbean Netherlands. The minimum wage, minimum benefits and child benefit have been increased significantly, and in 2024, the government has set aside an additional 7.6 million euros to enhance the social housing stock and 5.6 million euros for instruments that alleviate rental expenses. This year, the government has provided additional funding of 2 million to structurally support measurements against poverty and debt relief, and 9 million for different measurements to improve the purchase power. Because poverty is relatively high among single-parent households with children, the government currently explores the introduction of an income-dependent child benefit in the Caribbean Netherlands. Also, the costs of living in the Caribbean remains high. Therefore, the national government structurally subsidizes the fixed rates for utilities like electricity, drinking water, and fixed internet is structurally subsidized. Investments are made into the physical infrastructure and the rental subsidy, and the pilot private rental subsidy will achieve an average reduction in rental costs. And last, starting in 2027, parents will be covered 96% of the costs of childcare. Another unanswered question of yesterday was how we guarantee appropriate social security and equal access to the labor market, especially for people with disabilities. On equal access to employment, I will mention a few measures. Barriers are reduced through tailored job support, through subsidies, training, and workplace adjustments. The regional differences are addressed via pilots and cooperation between the government, municipalities, and employers. The progress is monitored through national indicators and reported to the Parliament. And specific measures for women include gender-sensitive job placement and support in combining care and work. There was a question about equal access to social security. The government improves income support by compensating disability-related costs and reviewing adequacy of benefits, and monitoring and input from persons with disabilities ensure adjustments when support is insufficient. On employers, incentives include wage cost subsidies, workplace adaptation funds, job coaching, and knowledge sharing, and government also leads by example through inclusive procurement and public sector employment. A last question, unanswered question, was about concerns about the social minimum guaranteeing a sufficient standard of living also for migrants, disabled, and other vulnerable groups. Since the recommendations of the Commission social minimum in the Netherlands, since they've been published, the government has invested in increasing the purchase power for people with low incomes, and this has led to a decrease of people living below the poverty threshold. This doesn't mean the problem is solved. In 2026, the estimation is that still 2.9% of the people are living in poverty, and 1.2 million people live just above the poverty threshold, meaning that they are still very vulnerable. So in the long term, several reforms are underway to simplify the income support system, reforming the allowances system, revising the Participation Act and the income support reform agenda. Also, the labor market reform will further contribute to strengthening job and income security. And to further combat poverty and indebtedness, the government has recently published the National Program on Anti-Poverty and Indebtedness. And in Sector 3, we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Good morning. I'll be taking several questions, starting with measures to address low wages in collective labor agreements. Wages are primarily the responsibility of social partners and laid down in collective labor agreements. The government sets a wage floor with the statutory minimum wage. Increasing the statutory minimum wage can have a leveling effect on the wage structure in collective labor agreements, as it reduces the differences between the lowest and the higher salary scales. Employers adjust the wage scales by also increasing salaries above the new statutory minimum wage to maintain wage differences, which lead to higher labor costs. The statutory minimum wage has been substantially increased the last years. Further statutory increases could lead to job losses. Then I'll move on to social minimum and minimum wage for youth. The social minimum for young adults aged 18 to 21 is aligned with the minimum wage for 18 to 21 years old persons. The social minimum cannot be lower than the youth wage for any given age. The reasoning behind this is that young people often have lower spending patterns and are not independent. Other factors to be taken into account are promoting youth employment and pursuing education. However, to improve adequacy for persons that are, for example, living independently, the government is preparing a law to increase the minimum wage for youth from 16 to 20-year-old, effective from 2027. The specific wage scale for vocational training will be abolished and aligned with the minimum youth wage. Moreover, the youth supplement will also be increased. This is a supplement that municipalities can provide to young people if their parents are not involved or cannot meet their child support obligations. Then moving on to a question about aging population and labor market shortages. Well, the Netherlands is facing a double aging of the population and a stagnating labor supply in the near future. Our economy is adapting to this transition, for example, through higher wages for employees and investments in labor productivity by employers. However, this process takes time and does not automatically lead to desirable outcomes. This requires us to modernize our economy and labor market to ensure our society remains agile. The government wants to develop an approach in close collaboration with society. It is pursuing this along 5 lines: choosing quality of work, strengthening the economy, increasing productivity, increasing sustainable labor market participation, and improving the match between job seekers and employers. The government is developing this commitment into a broad labor market agenda. The government engages in discussions on this topic with sectors, social partners, and other stakeholders, and organized a summit on labor shortages in March. Currently, the government is working on how to incorporate labor market effects of policies into policy decision making. Then to platform work, the Netherlands is improving platform worker conditions by aligning with the EU directive on platform work, which introduces a legal presumption of employment, increased algorithm transparency and human oversight, and new rules on data protection and unfair dismissals. These EU-level changes will be implemented into Dutch law by December 2026. I've got 2 left. Pregnancy discrimination. Unfortunately, research shows that in the Netherlands, 43% of women still experience situations that indicate pregnancy discrimination. This includes not being hired because of pregnancy or a suspected desire to have children. Efforts are made to put a stop to this, such as a national campaign meant to raise awareness on the rights of pregnant employees, a new study to pregnancy discriminations, results expected by the end of this year, and communication about rights and obligations to employers and employees. And the last one, discrimination against people with migration background. There is a connection between the Equal Opportunities Offensive, which I mentioned yesterday, and the Program for an Inclusive Labor Market, VIA. This VIA program examines 8 pilot projects to determine what works to improve the labor market position of people with a migration background. This has resulted in a clear picture of methods that have been proven effective in practice. A key action line is to further disseminate the experiences and insights gained within the VIA work agenda with a leading group of employers through the Equal Opportunities Offensive to a larger group of employers. In 2021, the work agenda was developed to encourage employers, municipalities, and educational institutions to implement these methods. The second VIA work agenda, covering the period 2025 to 2028, was developed with these partners last March. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and delegates. My name is Patrick Daring, and I will briefly wrap up Cluster 1 and 2 on 2 answers on illicit financial flows and tax avoidance and evasion. We've incorporated the recommendations of the Financial Task Force in national legislation, which determines international standards for preventing money laundering and terrorism financing. As shown in their last evaluation report in 2022, the Netherlands scores relatively good on the effective implementation of their standards. We have 2 ultimate beneficial ownership registers, one for company, one for trusts, and one for trusts and other legal constructions. Both are accessible for competent authorities. The Netherlands has a strong law on supervision of trust companies to prevent illicit or undesirable financial streams passing through the Netherlands. Regarding tax avoidance and evasion, over the past years, the Netherlands has taken various measures to reduce tax avoidance by multinationals. These have reduced financial flows to low tax jurisdictions from 37 billion in 2019 to 7 billion in 2023. Apart from that, the Netherlands has over the past years pushed to include anti-abuse provisions in tax treaties to prevent tax avoidance through tax treaties. We will continue to monitor the effects of our policy measures on tax avoidance on a yearly basis to continue reaching results. And I'll pass the floor back to Wilm to start answering on cluster 3. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll continue with cluster 3 right away. We have already eaten some of our time there, so we will try to be brief. I will start briefly with the follow-up questions that were asked on our upcoming updated national adaptation strategy. And the question was whether that would include binding and time-bound measures. So the strategy itself will not be legally binding, but it's a document that commits the government politically. But of course, various aspects of the strategy may be implemented in legislation or regulations, and then would become binding within the kingdom. There was a question on the safeguards for housing, health, and water that will be included in our National Climate Adaptation Implementation Program. So that adaptation implementation program is really a key building block for our new strategy, and it will contain relevant chapters with safeguards on housing, for example, resilient new buildings, addressing foundations of existing buildings, and managing heat. On health, again, questions on heat, allergens and vector-borne diseases and zoonosis, and water, for example, flooding and drinking water. For example, in the Caribbean Netherlands, with the isolated geography, it means that production and distribution of fresh drinking water is expensive. My colleague already referred to it. The government has made 3 million available to support the purchasing power of residents in relation to drinking water. And we're also investing in drinking water production and distribution facilities. Lastly, you asked about island-specific adaptation framework.
Could the speaker please slow down, note the interpreters?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep up with this, with the speed.
No.
With the time.
You'll have more time. You'll have more time.
Thank you. All right. So the kingdom pursues a 3-step strategy with respect to protecting the islands against the consequences of extreme weather. It's called the AAA strategy on analysis, ambition, and action. and it has been developed for the islands in the Caribbean Netherlands and is intended for use by public authorities, residents, and communities. I'll stop there and pass the mic to my colleague from Aruba again.
Yes. With regards to the question on to provide island-specific frameworks on climate action, Aruba since 2023 has created a National Climate Resilience Council. This council consists of multiple actors from different departments and entities. And the mission of this council is specifically geared towards developing a national climate resilience framework and enabling climate legislation to coordinate the execution of climate risk and resilience assessment, foster the development of institutional capabilities and governance for strengthening climate adaptation capacity and climate resiliency, identify climate finance needs and opportunities, and promote climate literacy and mainstream climate education to nurture inter- and intergenerational climate resiliency and equity. Moment, please. Yeah. So since 2021 of 2024, and as the head of the delegation referred, the council is also following the 3A steps, and we have divided it in multiple phases. So phase 1, analysis, 2024-2025. Analysis is being conducted on multiple climate risk and impacts, and this has resulted in a detailed climate risk profile and a climate impact atlas developed in collaboration with leading partners such as the Stimson Center and Climate Adaptation Services Foundation. For phase 2, this year, 2025, on the basis of the results of this analysis in 2025, the National Climate Resilience Council is developing a national adaptation strategy for Aruba and a climate adaptation plan for the short and medium term. These plans are organized into different adaptation clusters, including nature and biodiversity, heat and healthcare, water and energy security, and infrastructure. And on phase 3, action from 2026 onward, the transition to the action phase is scheduled for early 2026. In this phase, working groups will be responsible for developing multi-year investment plans and building capacity within the various clusters. Successful implementation of these plans depends on the mobilization of structural and sustainable climate financing. This is a crucial step in realizing a climate resilience Aruba. Thank you.
On the question asked yesterday to provide information on child poverty rates, especially in households with single parents and migrant families, last February, our Bureau for Economic Policy Analysis published the first poverty projections with the new poverty definition. For 2024, 3.5% of the inhabitants and 3.4% of the children in the Netherlands live in poverty. Both decrease in 2026 is the estimation to 2.9% of the inhabitants and 2.9% of the children who live in poverty. Poverty among migrants from outside the EU is 3 times higher than average. It's 13% against 4.4% on average. Especially among Syrian migrants, this is 34.1%, but also migrants from Morocco, Turkey, and the Caribbean Netherlands have a higher risk of poverty. The risk of poverty is high among single parents as well, with children under 18. This is 9.2%. This percentage has decreased significantly last year due to purchase power measures and increase of child-related budgets. The question asked next was what is done to combat child poverty, especially in households with single parents and migrant families. The national poverty funds are supported by the central government to ensure that as many children as possible who need support are reached. Various national poverty funds and social organizations receive resources to provide support to children and young people, for example, in the areas of school, sports, culture, and leisure. Also, school meals for schools are structurally financed. Municipalities provide support based on individual needs, for which they are financially facilitated by the government. Since 1.5 years, the 5 ministries within the social domain work intensively together to develop an integral approach to support vulnerable families with children. This is because poverty is a multidimensional problem and support in all domains in life is necessary. The question on how we follow up the recommendation of the Commission of the social minimum and how the government will ensure that the social minimum is raised to an adequate level. I addressed this question in the Sector 2 answer, so I will skip this one. There was a question about to provide information if there is a comprehensive national plan to address food poverty, as food aid is high. Food aid is part of the national program on anti-poverty and indebtedness. According to research by the Netherlands Red Cross, 450,000 people can't buy enough food. The Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment supports various organizations that provide food and emergency aid. We strive to reduce the number of people in need of food by extra efforts to reach them with food and income support through improved cooperation between national and local organizations, including organizations with roots in communities which are hard to reach. Municipalities try to identify people sooner so that the underlying causes of poverty can be addressed. Last question I will answer for now is what measures beyond food aid are being taken, for example, school meals. On the school meals, I can say the Dutch government facilitates school meals for schools with a large population of vulnerable pupils. The Youth Education Fund, together with the Red Cross, have reached more than 323,000 children with this program in the years 2023 and 2024. Thank you.
I will address the questions relating to the accessibility and affordability of childcare. In the Netherlands, we have a childcare allowance to help make childcare affordable for working parents. In addition, there are funds available at the municipal level to grant children from disadvantaged backgrounds access to childcare, including children from migrant families. This program is focused on children aged 2 to 4 with developmental delays, including language difficulties. The Dutch government is working on a childcare reform, which will make childcare almost free for working parents. Additionally, municipalities have been given more capabilities to reimburse the costs of childcare for low-income families. We are working on a labor market program to increase the number of childcare professionals. And finally, the government takes measures to ensure that taxpayers' money is intended for childcare is being spent efficiently. For example, we are establishing the childcare sector as a service of general economic interest, which will limit the profits being made in the childcare sector. And also we're putting a cap on the salaries that are paid to executives in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will reply to the question on the shortages and regional disparities in youth protection, and also say a few words on the strategies on gender-based violence and domestic violence. I apologize in advance, I do have some text to get through. The first bit on youth protection, first a point of clarification, because youth protection for us, we weren't quite sure if youth care or youth protection was meant with this question. I will give a brief overview of both. With the knowledge that youth protection involves rather protection measures covered by, imposed by a juvenile court to protect a child, and childcare involves rather medical health care, so physical and mental health care. So to first start with child protection, The government recognizes that there is indeed a need for timely protection in all regions. And while the latest progress report does indicate that we have improved on this matter, there are still about 4% of the children who are unable to receive timely care. So these are children who are already on the radar. And some of these do already receive some type of care. However, the safety of all these children is actively still monitored. Secondly, the government efforts to reduce the amount of children on the waiting list and to decrease the regional disparities is spearheaded by the introduction of a nationwide higher rate for the youth protection in order to reduce the workload of the professionals and the allocation of additional resources. These measures have addressed the youth inspection's recommendation to ensure that youth protection professionals have sufficient time for children. Since 2023, the workload for youth protection professionals has by now decreased by 25%. We have also implemented a subsidy scheme which supports the attraction of new and more employees from other fields. That way we ensure that we have enough employees to take care of the children who are currently being monitored by child protection services. However, this will not be everything. At the moment, the inspection is working on recommendations for the whole sector, and based on that, we will be proposing new ideas to combat this issue. I shall now move quickly on to the youth care part, because the government is also working on a revision of the youth care system and on improving specialized care. And this involves strengthening early support to families in vulnerable situations and to prevent children from being removed from their homes and families. That part does tie in with the first bit what I said about the child protection services. And also improved coordination and cooperation of the child protection organizations to provide more immediate and suitable care, and solving the disparities in purchasing specialized care, because the specialized care in the Netherlands is arranged via municipalities. So that means that each municipality requires a certain base of specialized care. Furthermore, this will be achieved by the establishment of neighborhood teams in each of the municipalities so that they're easily accessible for all the families in help, and merging organizations that are currently involved in providing protection and care to children in need of care placements, and so that they can operate more effectively and more efficiently. Furthermore, the legislation that obliges municipality to purchase specialized care collectively in regions has been established by the national government. This legislation is currently up for parliamentary approval, and we expect that this will be that this will come into effect by January 1st, 2026. So that will mean that the specialized care will be rather available in all parts of the Netherlands via the municipalities. This was the part on child protection and child care. If there are any further questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them. I will now move on to the absence of a comprehensive national action plan on gender-based violence and domestic violence, and our reply to that. So in the Netherlands, we are working on the implementation of the EU directive on violence against women and domestic violence. And this directive also addresses the importance of national action plans, monitoring, and national coordination. It is important to also say a few words on Caribbean Netherlands on this part. The Netherlands has recently ratified, somewhat recently ratified the Istanbul Convention. That is the convention from the Council of Europe on the prevention of and combating violence against women and domestic violence. The reason I mention this is because we are currently working on the implementation for Bonaire, Sint Eustatius, and Saba. For ease of reference, I will call them the BES Islands so that you know what I'm talking about. So for the adoption in the BES, my ministry is currently working on legislation to meet the treaty requirements by mapping out the consequences of the implementation. Alongside this, the ministries and the public entities of the BES, they are currently developing a future vision for addressing domestic violence, and this vision would set out long-term goals and will guide policy direction in the coming years. However, in the previous years, important steps have already been taken in order to improve policy and practice against domestic violence and child abuse in the BES. This includes the establishment of advice and reporting centers on the 3 islands, shelter for victims and a protection code, and a reporting right for professionals. Lastly, also a clarification of the definitions of domestic and child abuse in the respective laws. Also, it's important to note that the social work and psychological support services are also available on the islands to assist the victims of domestic violence and child abuse. Now, regarding the Netherlands and the approach of the Netherlands, the Dutch approach focuses very much on the specific types of violence on victims as well as perpetrators and adults as well as children, and is increasingly gender sensitive. So we do have a few action plans in place. For example, the Stop Femicide. Femicide is unfortunately still quite a problem in our country. According to Statistic Netherlands, about 80% of the women killed between 2018 and 2022, that is 172 women, were killed from someone from the domestic circle. So this is something that we're acutely aware of. And the plan that we have in place focuses on actions on the increase of expertise of professionals, raising awareness, the improvement of risk assessments, and a new legislative proposal for the criminalization of psychological violence. And this is expected to go into effect by next year. We further have a national action plan on program of sexual transgressive behavior and sexual violence, launched to strengthen protection and prevention against sexual transgressive behavior and sexual violence. This includes also online. The program aims to address the needed changes through, for example, education, raising awareness, activating bystanders, discussing sexual transgressive behavior, and providing support to victims. And as part of the implementation of the aforementioned EU directive and the action plan I just mentioned, Stop Femicide, we are exploring how national coordination can be improved. This is a point that has been mentioned also by the civil society organization, and we are very much aware of further coordination that is required. Following the research on this matter, the Netherlands is currently working out which scenario is most suitable. Also, the definition of domestic violence will be adjusted, and I mentioned this specifically because of the question on economic violence. The new definition will also include economic forms of violence, although I must say that economic violence was already falling under the current definition of domestic violence in the Social Support Act, but we do understand that a further clarification was needed, which explains the adjustment of the legislation. Yesterday, during the state's presentation of the budget, we further announced that there was 12 million euros extra that will be made available for women's shelter. On the topic of women's shelter, my colleague will further go into detail. Sorry, I close with a few brief words on tackling online violence, online discrimination, and online hate speech. This is a topic that is being worked on close cooperation among police, prosecutors, and reporting centers. We also have an authority on online terrorism and child sexual abuse material that has recently been granted administrative enforcement power. That means that this authority can now order hosting and communication service providers to remove or disable access to such content. Failure to do so will lead to a fine. There are surely other things that I could mention on this topic, but I will now pass the floor, and if there are any follow-up questions, please let me know.
Thank you. As this is the first time I'm taking the floor, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Susanne Damman. I'm representing the Ministry of Health. Thank you also to the esteemed committee members for the questions. I will be first addressing additional points on shelter, ensuring sufficient shelter for women and children. We're fully aware that there's currently a shortage of shelter spaces. This issue has the attention of the Secretary of State for Health, Welfare and Sport and will remain a priority for the coming years. In the Netherlands, most victim support services are the responsibility of municipalities and are organized regionally, with municipal councils ensuring availability and sufficient quality. A new law on housing, Wet Versterking Regie Volkshuisvesting, is anticipated to come into force in 2026 and requires municipalities to establish an urgency scheme for victims leaving women's shelters, which was previously voluntary. At the national level, the Health and Youth Care Inspectorate monitors aspects such as waiting times at the 25 regional Safe at Home or Veilig Thuis organizations. In addition, signals are monitored and the government maintains regular contact with representative organizations to identify issues and safeguard service quality across the country. A child can come along to the women's shelter, and it's preferable that the child receives care within its own network. Moving on to the questions about homelessness. In 2024, an estimated 33,000 people were homeless in the Netherlands. However, the true number is likely higher, as certain groups such as minors or individuals without legal status are not included in this estimate. Therefore, we are currently going through 2 projects working to improve data collection. 1, regional counts based on the European typology of homelessness and housing exclusion, or ethos, and 2, a national quantitative monitor in collaboration with our National Statistics Agency or Bureau. The National Action Plan on Homelessness aims to include all homeless individuals in data according to the Ethos Light classification by 2030. In 2023, about this action plan, the Dutch government launched the National Action Plan Homelessness, which has Housing First, led by the Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sport. The plan aims for a paradigm shift, viewing homelessness not as an individual problem, but as a shared societal issue. In line with the Lisbon Declaration, the plan sets the ambition to end homelessness by 2030. The plan is built on 6 pillars, strengthening livelihood security, prevention, housing first, better implementation, knowledge at all policy levels, and attention for specific groups, including homeless youth, LGBTIQ+, people, and EU citizens. It emphasizes prevention, housing, financial security, and accessibility. If there are more questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Briefly on the logistics, we have one more colleague speaking on the cluster 3 questions, but with quite some questions on housing, for example. Either we could take it right away, or we could first hear the follow-up questions on cluster 3. Go right away? Yeah, okay, please, Sanne.
Thank you for the questions. This might also take a bit of time. I'm going to speak to the questions about housing, more specifically housing shortage, supply of social housing waiting time, preventing the loss of mid-market housing, and addressing rent increases. On the topic of housing shortages and the supply of social housing, the Netherlands is currently confronted with a shortage of approximately 400,000 homes, representing nearly 5% of our total housing stock. To support the construction of these homes, a total of 5 billion euros has been made available for the period up until 2029. With these funds, the government supports the building of more affordable homes for people with low and middle incomes. 2/3 of the homes to be built must be affordable for households with low or middle incomes, with at least 30% being social housing. The government makes agreements on this with local authorities, provinces, and housing associations. Local authorities are responsible for providing sufficient housing plans, including agreements on affordability. These objectives are also included in the proposed Strengthening Housing Governance Act, along with measures to ensure compliance with these goals. As part of this, all local authorities contribute to the construction and maintenance of affordable homes for middle and low incomes, so that regional availability of affordable homes is better balanced. This ensures that people with low and middle incomes have a greater chance of finding an affordable home everywhere. Additionally, the Dutch government takes measures to improve procedures and simplify regulations so that housing projects can move more quickly from planning to realization. With regard to social housing in particular, we would like to briefly refer to the national performance agreements for the social housing sector, which were just adjusted in December 2024. These agreements hold ambitious goals for construction of social housing. Along the line of these agreements, social housing corporations will reach the target of 30,000 new homes annually by 2029, with the ambition to already reach this goal in 2027 by further speeding up construction. Housing associations are also committed in the agreements to the construction of 5,000 mid-rental homes yearly. Furthermore, moderate rent increases were agreed upon, as were ambitious goals for insulation and energy performance upgrading, and a package for supporting housing quality and the quality of the local environment. With regard to energy performance, housing associations focus on outphasing all E, F, and G label housing in or before 2028, and to attain 70% to 78% housing at an A or better levels in 2034. A specific question was also posed on how we intend to reduce the average social housing waiting time. The average social housing waiting time can be decreased first by increasing social housing construction. The national performance agreements I just mentioned, concluded in December 2024, strive to increase new housing construction to 30,000 units per year, but preferably already in 2027. Secondly, residential mobility frees up existing social housing for people eligible. This hinges upon the construction of new mid-rental sector and affordable owner-occupied houses for middle incomes currently in the social housing sector. Several measures mentioned above contribute to speeding up construction. Financial stimuli, the shortening of procedures, streamlining and simplifying building regulations, and even assisting municipalities and regions with coordinating all construction projects. And indirectly, households with higher incomes in the social housing sector get higher annual rate increases, higher rent fees forward into investment capacity of the housing associations, and also increase the incentive to move up on the housing ladder. We were also asked to explain how we intend to prevent the loss of mid-market houses. The state party is closely monitoring transactions in the housing stock on basis of quarterly data from the Land Registration Office, in Dutch we call that the kadaster. The sale of mid-rental houses, especially by smaller private landlords, is constantly monitored on basis of expected scenarios, and as of now, no deviations from the middle scenario are observed. Furthermore, loss of rental housing by selling former buy-to-let mid-rental houses is largely compensated by a new construction of institutional investors and housing associations, and by conversion of non-residential real estate and the improvement of dilapidated housing. It should be noted, though, that sale of former buy-to-let housing does not mean a loss of housing stock. It is merely a conversion between tenure forms. Most dwellings sold by buy-to-let investors are bought by first-time buyers who had seen their chances dwindle rapidly before the introduction of the Affordable Rent Act. So rather than talking about the loss of housing, it is a pendulum swing. Before the Affordable Rent Act, at the expense of young households seeking a first-owned home, and at the benefit of affluent private persons seeking to invest their capital in market-priced housing in popular cities. And now, with the Affordable Rent Act in place, the pendulum swings back towards the needs of young couples and families. The last question I will answer to at this point addresses the rent increases. In the Dutch rental sector, a point system is used to determine a maximum rent for social housing. The majority of rental houses are homes with a rental price below 900 euros a month. In recent years, the government has taken various measures to improve affordability for tenants. Key changes include the implementation of the just mentioned Affordable Rent Act that regulates also the rental prices of the mid-priced rental market and ensures that landlords can be confined if they rent out regulated rental houses at too high of a price. A different key change includes the restricting of the maximum rent increases in the private housing sector, which was implemented in 2021, extended in 2024 until 2029. This is additional to the already existing restrictions in the social rent sector. And a third change is the expanding of the eligibility to qualify for housing benefits from 2026 onwards. These measures are fundamental changes in our rental sector. Currently, the focus is less on introducing new additional measures and more on ensuring that current measures are properly implemented and enforced. Through an information campaign and close cooperation with municipalities and the Rent Tribunal, we ensure that landlords comply with the Affordable Rent Act and that violations are effectively enforced. Do you want me to stop? Okay.
Exhaustive answer, and I think if there are any other follow-up questions, we could answer them in the second follow-up part. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And of course, we are very interested in listening to all the details, but I'm sure there'll be some time afterwards during the follow-up session. So what I will do now is draw the attention of colleagues to please raise their questions, follow-up questions under cluster 3. And with that, I will first give the floor to Mr. Peter Muse, the cluster leader for Cluster 3, who had posed his questions last evening, but has additional questions. Mr. Muse, you have the floor, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I should start with Article 12 up to the next three clusters. Primary care and mental care health capacity. Please provide information on what the state party has done to alleviate the shortages of general practitioners in rural and some urban areas and the waiting lists for registration and appointments. Also provide information on the reason for the long waits for specialist mental health services, especially for youth and people with complex needs and regional disparities in availability. In your reply, please also set out a national health workforce plan with time-bound targets to address projected shortages, e.g., reports of major staffing gaps and burnout, including an estimated shortfall of up to 266,000 healthcare workers by 2035, and specify incentives for GP practices in undeserved areas, in brackets, scholarships, loan forgiveness, rural/urban hardship allowances, practice startup grants. The next question is for explaining how primary care access will be stabilized, e.g., funding for team-based care, physician assistants/nurse practitioners, task shifting, e-health triage, and how regional equity will be monitored, in brackets, public wait time dashboards, maximum registration list per practice. For specialist mental health, including youth, present wait time targets, ring-fenced funding for child and adolescent services, and measures to expand complex needs capacity across regions, e.g., integrated youth hubs, mobile teams, stepped care, giving evidence of high youth mental health needs and sleep/psychological problems. Indicate how the recovery and resilience plan measures to boost healthcare capacity. For instance, the National Healthcare Reserve are being deployed to reduce bottlenecks and regional disparities with evaluation milestones. The next question is number 9. It's on health inequities, migrants, persons with disabilities, low-income groups, and Caribbean Netherlands. Please provide information on the lower health outcomes for migrants, people with disabilities, and low-income groups, and limited targeted interventions, and what the state party has done to alleviate this. Regarding the Caribbean Netherlands health services, please provide information on what the state party has done when compared to European Netherlands to bring the lower availability of specialized care and preventive health programs to European standards. In your reply, please also report disaggregated outcomes, that is in brackets by income, disability, migration status, ethnic origin, age, sex, and set time-bound targets to narrow gaps in light of persistent right to health, under-fulfillment, and stagnation at the national level. The second one also, please also reply, in your reply, detailed targeted interventions community health, workers and interpreters for migrant health, accessible facilities, and reasonable accommodation protocols for persons with disabilities, and cost relief for low-income households. For instance, zero-cost preventive services, transport vouchers. Also explain how prevention will be scaled given projections of nearly 12 million people with chronic diseases by 2050. For instance, cardiovascular, dementia, osteoarthritis, in brackets, including screening and lifestyle programs targeted to disadvantaged groups. Caribbean Netherlands set out concrete timelines and financing to expand specialist rotation / telemedicine, medical evacuation coverage, and island-based diagnostics. B, close gaps in preventive programs, e.g. cancer screening, NCD management. And C, ensure workforce attraction / retention, that's in brackets, housing allowances, so that available approaches European Netherlands benchmarks. The last one is please provide an update on measures to end medically unnecessary non-consensual interventions on intersex children, including the status of a legal ban recommended by national studies in 2019 and 2024 and supported by parliamentary motions and national human rights institution actors, along with access to redress and specialized psychological support. Those are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muse. I have also got requests for the floor from Ms. Krachinia Tatu, followed by Ms. Perez. Ms. Krachinia Tatu, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I would like to follow up on a recommendation which the committee has previously addressed to the Netherlands in respect of sexual and reproductive health, more precisely on a piece of legislation on abortion in St. Martin. That legislation prohibits abortion in all circumstances, and when the Netherlands was under review in 2017, there were some developments in respect of the changes in this legislation. So my question is whether the delegation could provide us with an update and whether the legislation referring to abortion in St. Martin was changed in order to make it compatible with our general comment number 22 from 2016 on the right to sexual and reproductive health. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez, followed by Ms. Rossi. Ms. Perez.
Buenos días a
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the information that the delegation has shared with us so far. I have a question, a very specific question, actually. Nearly all indicators on child vaccine coverage show a significant drop since the pandemic. So we are concerned about the existing anti-vax movements throughout the world. Specifically looking at the data on measles vaccine, we see that approximately it's dropped by 10 percentage points in 2 years. So we'd like to know if you have any plans on reiterating how important vaccination is everywhere in the kingdom, but especially in the Caribbean Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Ms. Rossi.
Gracias. Buenos días a la
Thank you. Good morning, delegation, and thank you for the information shared so far. I wanted to ask some clarification on the right to housing, access to proper housing, adequate housing. It's been talked about it already a little bit, but in the Netherlands, affordable housing are fewer and fewer, and access to social housing is increasingly problematic, according to available data. There's a drop in the number of social housing available. And we also heard of urban renovation policies that demolish urban housing projects. So given the access to housing crisis, could you please provide more information about it? How do you plan on resolving or addressing the situation? Also on migrants who are usually subjected to discrimination in access, and they're included in the statistics of those without shelter, and they're in temporary housing for a very long time. And then we also have the legislation that I mentioned yesterday that to a certain extent discriminates migrants and access to social housing. So with all that in mind, I would appreciate more information about measures that you are taking in order to address this discrimination against migrants and refugees. And lastly, on environmental policy, though you have provided some information, I would appreciate it if you could elaborate further, because we understand that right now there is a national isolation plan in order to refurbish housing. But as far as we have understood, these plans are not meeting the stated goals, and they're only making slow progress in decarbonizing the housing industry in the time required. So that's it. Thank you.
Proceed, Mr. Winfer.
Just in addition to questions on housing, uh, really of interest in this context, yeah. Why there are so many houses missing? That is a good question, I think, because you haven't been increased your population by so many people. So there are two questions. One is, if you build social housing, do you have a requirement how long it should be social housing, or is it fading away, this requirement, and later it can be sold or used as normal housing on the market? Do you think about maybe keeping it as social housing for a longer period? Something which we have in my country, and it's heavily debated. The second one is, per average in the European Union, I know that historically people were living maybe on 22 square meters per head in families. Yeah, today it's in many countries 42 square meters per head. Yeah, so it's an increase of let's say understanding how much housing we need. But if we build another 4, is that possible to discuss this also on the housing market? There's also one link behind this. If we talk about CO carbon to avoidance, 400,000 housing is already creating a lot of CO2 emissions. Yeah, it's a lot of concrete. Yeah, so what discussions are there? Or is it too difficult to keep them? Yeah, just to flag this because it links to maybe how to find adequate solutions to this. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Winfer. I see that there are no requests for the floor. From my side, Your Excellency, I thought I'd just draw your attention to a concern that has been brought to our attention. You've been asked several questions about the Caribbean Netherlands. From Bonaire, we have this, that, apparently imposition of healthcare laws and policies, such as legalization of euthanasia, etc., is done without cultural adaptation, consultation, or community consent, and that it violates their religious and cultural beliefs, and of course their right to self-determination. And so I just also, highest attainable standards of mental health and standards of health in general. So I just wanted to know from you whether the state party, how does it ensure that its healthcare laws and its practices are culturally appropriate, and that they respect cultural and religious freedom of the islands, in the Caribbean Netherlands. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, these are the end on the round of follow-up questions to cluster 3, and the delegation will have 20 minutes. And if you could kindly respond within these 20 minutes, because now we're a little behind time. But please.
Yeah. I need to consult with my delegation on the order of the questions, because there are a lot of last-minute questions. One moment, please.
Twenty minutes to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This was the time pressure we knew would be coming. I would like to ask my colleague of the Ministry of Justice to start, following up with asylum and migration and healthcare colleagues, and then we'll see how far we've become. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I will quickly answer to the question on intersex persons asked by the distinguished rapporteur. A medical guideline is currently being developed to ensure that intersex children receive appropriate care when necessary, guided by an interdisciplinary team, and it will be published in the second half of 2025, so it's on the way. From that time, research will also begin into the best regulatory approach to prevent non-consensual unnecessary treatments for intersex people. This will include input from affected individuals, medical experts, and human rights specialists, and will include in late 2026. Both efforts aim to safeguard intersex persons' rights to self-determination and bodily autonomy while ensuring access to necessary care. The distinguished rapporteur asked a question on redress and asked a question on a ban. So regarding the question on redress, this is currently not a discussion in the Netherlands because there are currently no existing laws or regulations requiring intersex children to undergo surgery. However, regarding a possible ban, a process is underway to examine whether and how legislation and regulations can prevent potential suffering among intersex children. This process was initiated following the adoption of parliamentary motions, as mentioned by the rapporteur, on the introduction of a legal ban on non-consensual and non-necessary medical treatment, and the state is in the process of commissioning an in-depth scientific research to examine the pros and cons of the various forms of regulation. And to explain a little bit further, regarding these operations on intersex children, there is currently debate about what is meant exactly by necessary care and unnecessary care and what it would subsequently entail. There's no consensus on this point, which would explain the reason why this is still under research. This is all I can share for the moment.
Yes, then I will answer the question regarding shelter for undocumented migrants, also in relation to the criminalization of undocumented people. So I thought it would be good to explain more in detail what kind of shelter is offered to this group of undocumented migrants. So the Netherlands does provide different types of accommodation for foreign nationals that are obliged to return or are residing illegally in the Netherlands, but it is with the explicit condition of cooperation with their return. And imposing this condition is allowed based on the EU Return Directive. And also good to mention is that the Netherlands, of course, always has the legal obligation to avoid situations in which migrants without legal residence find themselves in a situation of far-reaching material deprivation. So this is always underlined and stressed. And of course, it's important that these undocumented migrants who are staying in the Netherlands are provided with needed care and shelter. And as I already stated yesterday, they have the right to medically necessary care, and this right is very important to maintain. And also good to mention that there are multiple organizations and municipalities that are committed to supporting undocumented migrants by providing shelter and guidance. Thank you.
Colleagues of the Health Ministry, are you ready to answer the first batch?
I can answer some of the questions already. Some of them I'm waiting for a response from my ministry, so I hope it's coming within a couple of minutes. So, okay. Yes. Okay, so starting with the question on on NCDs, in particular also that includes cancer and everything that has been mentioned. The Netherlands addresses non-communicable diseases through the Comprehensive Prevention Agreement 2018-2024, involving 70 public and private organizations. It focuses on reducing alcohol and tobacco use, tackling overweight, and promoting healthy nutrition and physical activity. Measures include improving the food environment in schools, kindergartens, and hospitals, reformulating products, and introducing the Nutri-Score, front of pack labels to guide healthier choices in supermarkets. On alcohol, awareness campaigns such as Dry January, stricter rules on online sales, and reinforcements of the nix or nothing before 18 norm aims to protect youth. A recent prevention strategy where the focus is on 7 environments adds new actions, including monitoring the share of healthy versus unhealthy products in supermarkets, and is setting targets with retailers to improve this ratio. Specifically on cancer and cardiovascular, in November 2023, the Netherlands Cancer Agency was adopted as a broad bottom-up initiative of the Netherlands Cancer Collective. This was unique and united over 150 organizations. The agenda sets 20 ambitious goals across prevention, early detection, treatment, and quality of life for cancer patients or ex-cancer patients to be achieved by 2032. It aims to reduce cancer incidence, strengthen personalized medicine, and improve the lives of former patients while fostering coordinated cooperation and aligning with Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. The Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sport actively supports the agenda. Long-standing policies on prevention also target non-communicable diseases more broadly, with notable progress in reducing tobacco use, such as adult smoking declined from 26% in 2014 to 18% in 2024, contributing to cancer and cardiovascular disease prevention. On translation services, The Netherlands acknowledges that clear communication between patients and healthcare professionals is essential. Formal interpreter services are funded, but the arrangements differ under the 5 healthcare laws. Under the Healthcare Insurance Act, insurance can be reimbursed. New funding solutions under that act are also being studied. In long-term care, wet langdurige zorg, interpreters are mainly needed at intake. In public health, wet publieke gezondheid, municipalities and centers for sexual health arrange interpreters with costs covered through municipal budgets or central subsidies. And then under the Social Support Act and the Youth Care Act, the remaining 4th and 5th Act, municipalities decide on interpreter support, often through contracts with care providers. Municipalities and providers are encouraged to strengthen these agreements and inform professionals. That's what I can answer for the moment, and I will hope to have more information for you very shortly. Thank you.
The questions that have been raised with regards to housing, I'm also still waiting on answers to some of the questions. As to the question on renovation, it is true that these sometimes include the demolition of social housing. It should be understood, though, that the people in these houses in many cases get priority reallocation or a right to return to new housing with rent protection and entitlement to, for instance, housing benefits. It should also be understood that especially older social housing is of substandard energetic performance, exposing households to higher energy bills or saving on heating and exposing them to their health. Sometimes demolition and new construction is the best option. There was also a question asked with regard to the legislation on the ban of priority of refugee status holders. I will have to repeat a bit of the answer that I already gave yesterday, which was that the Dutch government aims to normalize the position of residency permit holders with regards to housing. It has drafted legislation to end the current practice of refugee residency permit holders receiving priority access to housing due to the fact that they have a residency permit. The Dutch government believes that the residency permit holders should not receive urgency unless this is warranted for other reasons, for example, because of medical circumstances. And in these cases, refugee residency permit holders will still receive priority under the same circumstances as other citizens looking for a home when the draft legislation is enacted. The Dutch government maintains that this drafted policy would normalize the position of refugee residency permit holders and is compatible with the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. The drafted legislation is currently being reviewed by the Council of State, also on its constitutionality. These are the answers I can provide at this point.
Perhaps I could briefly add on the issue of housing. My colleague has done a tremendous job, I think, in answering as many questions as possible. I think it's clear to all of us that the issue of the lack of adequate housing, the number of houses is a major political debate also in the Netherlands, also in the upcoming elections. So this is the policies of the current caretaker government. I have no doubt that all the political parties that are now running for election will come up with their own ideas and their own strategies. So we will also see what the new government will decide in this area. I would also like to briefly come back to the question of the distinguished delegate on the situation in St. Martin. I'm sorry to have to reiterate my stance from yesterday that the colleagues of St. Martin are not present in our delegation. They are an autonomous country in the kingdom also on this issue, so we cannot answer it on their behalf. We also don't have the opportunity to contact them right away, but if the committee so desires, we will certainly relay your question and we're ready to come back to it at any moment in time. This is what we could do now on the follow-up question on cluster 3. As briefly discussed with the chair, if we would be ready to continue with answering cluster 4, and then we could put any of the questions that we'll still be working on cluster 3, take it with us in our response at the end of cluster 4.
Yes, Your Excellency. What we can do for time management is, in the next 30 minutes, you could start responding to cluster 4 questions. And also, meanwhile, if you have your responses on cluster 3, please respond. Otherwise, we'll move on to the follow-up questions on cluster 4. So you have another 30 minutes, please.
And for this cluster, I unfortunately have to give the word to my colleague of the Ministry of Education, who I think will be answering most or all of the questions under this cluster. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And well, it's not too unfortunate that I have to take the floor, but my name is Edwin Koning. I'm from the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science. And indeed, I will take the majority of the answers of the fourth cluster of questions. And I thank the esteemed rapporteur for the pertinent questions. A number of issues in the Netherlands and in Caribbean Netherlands. I try to address them in a certain order, but I have to switch between screens sometimes. First part is about, there we go already, about educational inequalities. Or equal opportunities, as we prefer to call them. In the Netherlands, communities as well as schools receive money to address distances in the education system. So it is mentioned for the early and preschool education and out-of-school education, such as summer programs or international classes for migrant students to learn the Dutch language. This is part of the budget for this is part of the regular budget of the schools and can be used to reduce the number of students in a class or to improve language education. So we have also the Equal Opportunities Alliance, and this alliance is working together with the ministry, communities, schools, civil society organizations to improve equal chances for children in several programs, such as school and its environments, with also attention for the situation at home, addressing poverty, addressing violence at home, as has been mentioned in different interventions already. Because we believe that if children are in a quiet situation, they will have better chances in education as well. Then also with regarding to equal opportunities or equal chances, we have to address the post-COVID situation. Because during the COVID pandemic, for a short time, schools had to be closed. And for a long time, children had to follow distant learning. And this led to a lot of challenges, both for teachers and for students, with regard to education performance, as well as well, social performance. So in February 2021, we introduced a national education program to address the learning delays and mental health issues of students, and a total budget of 8.5 billion euros was allocated to support education ranging from elementary to higher education, of which 5.8 billion euro was meant for primary and secondary education. This enormous amount of money, extra money, benefited 1.5 million students in primary education and 1 million students in secondary education. And this support was available for all schools based on a needs assessment. And it varied on the type and proportion of the student population with a high risk of learning delays. Schools could choose from a list of internationally proven effective interventions. These interventions were based on the teaching and learning toolkit of the Education Endowment Foundation. And next to education tools, it was also interventions on mental well-being. The results of the program have been closely monitored, and they have been used to enhance the program over the years. And now we can see preliminary results of recovery for primary education, while the results have not yet indicated a recovery in secondary education. But monitoring is still ongoing, and we expect the reports of the latest results in December 2025. The lessons learned, like working evidence informed, are used more widely now, and specifically in other policy programs such as the Master Plan Basic Skills and the reform of the curriculum. Then we go to the updating of the curriculum, including citizenship education and the participation of stakeholders. Yes. Well, our current curriculum was developed in 2006, and it was found that it is outdated. So since a number of years, we are working on a curriculum reform. It was necessary to update it in order to be relevant for the current societal topics and challenges which need to be addressed in the classroom. Apart from the update to modernize the curriculum, the reform also needs to more precise and more concrete attainment goals. The current goals are quite broadly defined, making it sometimes difficult for teachers and educational personnel to grasp the exact meaning of it. And by reforming the curriculum, the attainment goals become more clear, resulting in better quality of education. This reform is performed by the Dutch organization SLO, which is called the Dutch Curriculum Development Foundation, which is uniquely equipped to facilitate the reform. They are employing a wide range of educational and curricular experts. And in cooperation with numerous stakeholders, SLO works on this reform. These reforms include sector councils for primary education, secondary education, vocational education, practical education, teacher organizations, trade unions, professional organizations, associations, and also educational institutions, including research organizations to support the scientific background of the reform. So I think that's also an answer to the question of the rapporteur about including civil society organization and other stakeholders. An important part of this reform of the curriculum is the improvement on basic skills. In OECD reports, PISA results, it was found that the quality of reading and writing and STEM skills of students was getting lower and lower. And therefore, since 2022, the Netherlands implements a comprehensive master plan basic skills that strives to enhance the results of students on the basic skills, being language, mathematics, citizenship, and digital literacy. The plan works both on a policy level, addressed at curriculum renewal, teacher shortages, etc., as well as on practical level, developing instruments hand-on to help teachers in improving their lessons. And we encourage schools and school leaders to work evidence-informed on better education. For this improvement of, for this master plan basic skills, also extra funding was available to improve the basic skills, also on a needs-based assessment. And currently, almost 95% of the students is reached with these programs. And schools are very positive about the means they get for it, as well as the support they also receive from advisors from the ministry. And after 2 years, many of these subsidized schools see a positive effect on the results of their students. Then we go to barriers for children with disabilities. What do we undertake to decrease the number of children with disabilities who experience difficulties in schools? Well, currently we are working to increase both the current as well as future participation of students in education. To boost participation now, we are working on improving the approach to tailored education, passend onderwijs, which ensures the necessary steps are taken to enable more children to participate. For enhancing the possibilities for remote education for a specific group of students, and through education care arrangements, we provide tailored support to meet individual student needs. Additionally, we are developing legislation to secure this tailored support in a structural and lasting way. So it's no longer subsidized, but it will be in a structured way. Looking ahead, the Netherlands is also actively implementing measures to support children with disabilities as part of our transition towards fully inclusive education by 2035. And our goal is to ensure that every child can attend a school close to home and participate fully and equally in learning and developing, regardless of their support needs. If possible, within the regular education system, and if with some support tools, and if not, then with the extra support for special education. Then with regard to education, pupils transportation, some of the students need public transport to get in schools because of wheelchair transportation or things like that. This, unfortunately, is under pressure. and it will not be resolved very quickly, partly because of a shortage in drivers. But we are in close contact with municipalities who are responsible for pupils' transport. And we encourage them to develop policies and have negotiations when procuring pupils' transport, that the quality is good and the frequency is also adequate. And together with other ministries, we are now working on better supervision, better procurement by municipalities, and actions aimed at recruiting more drivers for pupil transport. We also had a question about special education needs in the Dutch Caribbean, of the Caribbean parts of the Netherlands, where currently we are in the process of reviewing the measures and demands on specific needs education in the Netherlands part of in the Caribbean parts of the Netherlands, with the intention of customization for the specific circumstances in the region. Because of the smaller number of students, this can only be on a specialized request-based approach. Tailored support, it was called. Then we had a question about teacher shortages. Sometimes the computer needs refreshment. Yes. What do we do to address shortages of teachers? Well, there's a two-tiered approach. The first is directed towards the inflow of teachers, both new students and lateral inflow in teacher trainings and in schools, as well as in retaining teachers. On the first part, we are making teaching more appealing and accessible by launching a multi-year campaign, Working with the Future, that's already sparked real interest, especially from career changers and students. And well, this is a promotion campaign with which we try to spread the following message. Working in education means working with the future. It's meaningful work with a serious salary and the opportunity to keep developing yourself. And from my own experience, I can say this works. 3 weeks ago, my son started with training to become a teacher in primary education. And so far, he's very enthusiastic about it. Well, N is one. Also, this campaign is supported by supporting policies such as strengthening regional collaboration, improving teacher education, ongoing teacher education, and boosting strategic staffing. The second part of the program is retaining teachers, which is directed to improvement of salary, because teachers' unions indicated that the salary gap between primary and secondary education was a major element in the decision of students not to choose for a job in education. And over the few recent years, we have increased the salary in primary education, bringing it in line with secondary education to ensure equal pay. And to make education more attractive as an employer, we introduced also targeted market allowances. We're opening teaching opportunities for newcomers. We're supporting early career teachers by coaching, for example. And we're financially supporting lateral entrance. And of course, we try to reduce the administrative burden. Then we have education in the Caribbean Netherlands. Quality of education in the Caribbean Netherlands, as well as lower education outcomes. We have an intense program to increase the performance rate of Caribbean students. Part of it is together with the countries between the Netherlands, Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, because we have an annual ministerial meeting between the countries. And together they developed the Strategic Education Alliance. And this alliance helps, for example, for students to get scholarships, to travel within the kingdom, to go on an exchange within the kingdom, and to go on internships between the different countries of the kingdom, and increase the experiences. We also have a cooperation between Dutch universities and Caribbean universities within the Caribbean Academic and Vocational Foundation year to better prepare students for further education in VET and further education on academic level. And we also have a program to better inform students, to prepare them on follow-up education through buddy system and Dutch language lessons.
Do you have left? Do you have an indication?
I have, I think, this is the last part on education, and then the culture parts. Yeah. Then I think with regard to education in Caribbean Netherlands, we are aware of challenges on the quality of education. Therefore, we have also decided to work on curriculum reform in Caribbean Netherlands as well, starting with language education, Dutch language and Papiaments language in Bonaire, and Dutch and English education in Saba and Sint Eustatius, which we expect the first results of the testing of the attainment goals in 2026. And the attainment goals for calculus and maths will be translated in English for Saba and Statia later this year, so that they can be tested there as well. That's for now for the education part. Then we have education. Then we have access to cultural life. So we have a subsidy program for subsidies. We pay ample attention to geographical distribution, but we get recurring questions that the geographical distribution is insufficient. And so we are now investigating the situation to determine whether additional measures are necessary. And with regard to women and in higher education, or diversity and inclusion in higher education, we have a special committee for this, advising the ministry on issues concerning women, migrants, and other groups, including a national network of female professors that advocates for the position of women in academia, and we support this through funding. And the final thing I would like to say is about heritage in the Caribbean. Yes. A few years ago, we had the National Year to Remembrance of Slavery History in the Netherlands, which was a pan-government program. All ministries worked in that program, but also my ministry. And we had one of the elements of it is to place a stronger emphasis of the colonial and slavery history of the Netherlands in the curriculum, both in the Netherlands as in the Caribbean part of the Netherlands, and on the impact of slavery history on current generations. And we also introduced a research chair together with the universities of Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin. And I will leave it to that for this moment. Thank you.
One brief addition on cluster 4, and then we can get back to the delayed questions on cluster 3.
Thank you. There was one question asked about measures to address geographic and economic barriers to participating in a cultural life. In answer to that, to ensure that children in low-income households can participate in and outside school, various national poverty funds and social organizations receive resources to provide support to children and young people, for example, in the areas of school, sports, culture, and leisure. And municipalities provide support based on individual needs. This concerns children as well as adults. Many municipalities, for example, provide city passes to people with low incomes, which enable them to participate in cultural life. Municipalities can also reimburse costs for transport activities. Thank you.
Thank you. We continue the colleague from the Interior Kingdom Relations Ministry, also responsible for housing on cluster 3.
There were still some unanswered questions, also from your distinguished member Windfer. One of the questions was on social housing and if social housing could be social housing forever. And in principle, social housing in the Netherlands is social housing forever. Housing associations sometimes sell social housing to existing tenants in order to gain new funds for new construction and to free up other suitable housing. As to the question on the increasing floor space per person over the years, we note that this has indeed increased. This is the result of building many homes in the 1970s and the 90s, 80s for young families, providing sufficient floor space. Currently, these families are empty nesters, leaving many elderly people in quite large houses. Strong efforts are undertaken for proper housing for the elderly as well as a means to provide for better occupation of existing housing. We were also asked by a different member on why houses are missing. During the financial crisis, the construction sector lost quite some capacity, which is not easily rebuilt. The Netherlands intends to improve state coordination on construction, as also proposed in the Housing Governance Act. There was also a question asked on the new construction efforts leading to CO2 emissions. This is one of the reasons the Netherlands intends to upskill new efficient construction methods and improve circularity on the building sector. Details can be shared in writing if requested.
Ministry, could they continue with that on cluster 3, or you want, because time's up, so I'm in your hands about how to proceed.
Yeah, I suggest that we take the follow-up questions, and then you have time to respond to the follow-up questions and the residual questions.
Yeah, so the follow-up questions of cluster 4, you mean?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
right.
So, Your Excellency, if that's all right, maybe I will just pause. We are, of course, very interested in listening to all the responses. We've been jumping clusters, but that doesn't mean that we are following the debate very carefully, the discussions very carefully. But I thought we'll pause at the moment for the next 10 minutes just to take follow-up questions on cluster 4, so that then in your responses, you can respond to those questions as well as whatever else that has been left unanswered. So the floor is open for follow-up questions. And I see Ms. Laura Krachinetatu has requested for the floor, followed by Ms. Rossi. Ms. Krachinetatu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I would just like to go back to partially to two of my questions that were previously addressed. And the first one is related to the increased ethnic and socioeconomic segregation in primary and secondary schools, and the connection of this with the residential segregation. So here I just want to ask whether the delegation has any information that would contradict this, because what we understood so far that this segregation in primary and secondary schools, especially in the urban area, is linked with the residential segregation. So if there are measures in place to address this. And also on human rights, citizenship education, I appreciate the answer which was provided by the member of the delegation, but maybe just to reiterate that one part of the question was referring also to the place of economic, social and cultural rights within the citizenship education. So if the curriculum is also addressing economic, social and cultural rights, that would be very interesting to know. And thank you very much for the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Rossi, followed by Mr. Bouzid. Ms. Rossi.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I had a question on this cluster specifically, and regarding the island of Bonaire. How do you guarantee the inclusion of native language and cultural content in the educational system in the island of Bonaire? And how do you ensure that the teaching methods are culturally appropriate? And how do you involve local communities and educators in drafting policies on education that reflect the cultural identity of Bonaire and preserve it? Also, what measures are you adopting to recognize the authority and leadership of the native population in cultural and institutional governance, as well as to promote and protect knowledge, history, and cultural heritage of the island? And lastly, how do you guarantee participation and significant consultation of indigenous and native communities in the decisions that affect their own cultural and social development, considering, of course, environmental policies also? And then I have two more questions. One is following up on extraterritorial obligations of the state party regarding the rights of the covenant. A question that our colleague Bouzid asked yesterday. You answered, but aside from the reply that the state party had yesterday, the committee has information saying that the state party continues to authorize certain arms exports in spite of the obligations imposed by the covenant to ensure that its trade relations and investment relations do not contribute to violations of rights abroad. Though general licenses for military exports to Israel have not been used in October 2023, as has been mentioned, according to information available, individual permits continue to be granted for military and dual-use material, which can contribute to serious systematic violations of the rights of the Palestinian people, particularly in the Gaza Strip, and basic rights such as food, sanitation, housing, and also the right to self-determination. So really, it's a follow-up question. Could you provide additional information about measures to suspend or restrict said exports, and more broadly, to review economic and trade relations with the State of Israel? In light, especially of recent decisions of the International Court of Justice of January 2026 and July 19, 2024, and the findings of the new report of the Independent Commission of the United Nations on occupied Palestinian territory, which was distributed yesterday, in which determines that Israel is responsible for genocide of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And lastly, I have an additional question on extraterritorial obligations. What is the state party's position as a member of international financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank? What is the state's position given the debt crises of developing countries? And how do you guarantee that all decisions related to loans to these countries, including conditions, which usually are austerity measures, and debt sustainability assessments, are aligned with the commitments of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the borrowing countries, and the broader commitments on gender equality and climate justice? And then also, does the state party promote the systematic assessment of loans and impact on human rights? It has been recommended by this committee on the Declaration on Public Debt and Austerity Measures of 2016. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Rossi. Mr. Bouzid, you have the floor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A recent study by the Netherlands Institute for Human Rights shows that students with disabilities experience digital inaccessibility in education. My question is, when and how will the government ensure that digital accessibility requirements apply to the whole of the education system? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see that there are no other requests for the floor. So I will just give the delegation another 20 minutes. I think we should be able to manage. 20 minutes, yeah. In the next 20 minutes or 25 minutes at most, yes. Then we have to close the meeting.
Yes.
So the delegation has 25 minutes to respond to these follow-up questions as well as the balance questions. You have the floor, sir.
Chair, my proposal will be to ask the colleagues of the Health Ministry to first address the remaining questions on Cluster 3, and then we'll do our best in a given time frame to answer as much questions of the follow-up on Cluster 4. So please, Suzanne.
Thank you. Regarding the questions, we've got information incoming, so this is what we currently have. The Supplementary Healthcare and Welfare Agreement, ASWA, has recently been signed and contains agreements between healthcare and welfare organizations and the Ministry of Health. These agreements are intended to ensure that healthcare and support in the Netherlands remain accessible and affordable, regardless of where you live, whether you have a small or large wallet, what your condition is, or what your age is. Concrete goals are reduce new staff shortage by 100,000 people by 2028, more equal access to care, including mental health care, and also a strategy on how to include tech innovation on improving care and reduce shortages in staff are included. We can send the agreement to the committee if desired. Regarding the question on Sint Maarten, unfortunately, we cannot speak for Sint Maarten. They have their own independence on this. Shortages in GPs across the country. We can say that collaboration with the regional general practitioner organizations and the municipalities, for example, is working to find new practices, new practice owners, and creating sufficient care space. There are more hybrid practice models combining in-person and digital consultations. There's also a focus on practice assistance and more digital communication. Regarding the waiting times in specialist youth care, we're aware of reasons for waiting lists and waiting times. We are concerned about that too. Inadequate problem analysis, for example, resulting in children not receiving appropriate care and having to return or to be referred repeatedly, municipalities not cooperating effectively with each other, with providers, and insufficient specialist care has been purchased in the region. So what are we doing about it? The Youth Care Support Team has a waiting times approach that addresses the regional causes of waiting times. The Improving the Availability of Youth Care Bill tackles bottlenecks in the contracting of specialist youth care in order to improve the availability of care. In this way, the bill contributes to tackling waiting times. In addition, the same bill stipulates that municipalities must indicate in their regional vision how they are working to tackle waiting times. I'd also like to now give further answers to the questions around taking steps to reduce lower health outcomes for certain groups. Particularly, I have an answer for people with disability. The future agenda for care and support for people with disabilities aims to make healthcare more accessible and sustainable for those in residential facilities and those receiving home care. It focuses on renewing disability care and strengthening organizations to meet changing needs. The agenda promotes new ways of working that enable more appropriate care, self-direction, and independence, while ensuring availability, affordability, and quality in the long term. Key themes include addressing complex needs, supporting people with mild intellectual disabilities, improving client support, using innovation and technology, strengthening the workforce, and providing lifelong social support. Everyone with a long-term care indication is entitled to high-quality tailored care with ongoing research addressing organizational challenges. So this goes for everyone. Steps taken to improve health on the Caribbean islands, specifically on NCDs, which I omitted to share before. In the Caribbean islands, there are several prevention programs, such as JOG and Healthy Schools. They're being implemented where their focus is on accessible sports and combined lifestyle interventions that are available through health insurance for both youth and adults. So how does the Netherlands ensure that health standards are on the same level in the Netherlands relating specifically to specialized care and staff shortages? This is for the Caribbean islands. Much has been done since October 10, 2010, when Bonaire, Statia, and Saba since when they held the special status as municipality within the kingdom to improve healthcare. Many challenges remain to bring healthcare to a level comparable to that of the EU. Previously, efforts were made to achieve an acceptable level of healthcare, but in 2022, the government announced its intention to move from an acceptable level to a comparable level in the Caribbean islands, so the levels being increased. Therefore, among other things, a health deal was developed to collaborate with the islands in the coming years on prevention and health and to attract sufficient qualified personnel. This includes developing a future-oriented labor market program for healthcare in the Caribbean Netherlands. The health deal sets out ambitions and agreements between the government and local authorities. On the vaccination question, we're very much aware of the dropping rates and very concerned about this as well. We see this as a trend in many countries. The government therefore organizes specific campaigns targeted at groups where there are lower rates. Experience has shown that local campaigns in their own communities are most effective to increase vaccination rates and trust. So this is where the government is focusing their campaigns. For example, we're sending in teams into neighborhoods to talk with people directly, for example, in the markets, as well as in schools, to ensure this information is getting out. This is the information I currently have. I will stop here. Thank you. I can answer further questions if more information comes in or send further after. Thank you.
Do we have any remaining questions on cluster 3? Not, I think we can continue with cluster 4, and I think Edwin from the Edwin Koning, Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, please.
Yes, thank you, and also thank you for the additional questions. First question was about the increased ethnic segregation in schools combined with residential segregation. Well, I don't know much about residential segregation, but I can say a little bit about measures to combat ethnic segregation in school, or differences in quality in education which may lead or result from the school population. So for a student, it matters to which school he or she will go. Indeed, sometimes when you have an unpreferential background, this is a bad start for your career in school as well. So we try to have policies on combating that. As I mentioned, we have this Equal Opportunities Alliance, and it's the main target of this alliance to increase the opportunities of children. Most policies of the Ministry of Education are geared towards sustainable increase of quality of the entire education. But we also have specific attention for schools that are very weak or insufficient. They get money and support to increase the quality of their system, of their teachers, and in the end, increase the results of the students. And they also get extra attention from the Inspectorate from Education and suggestions how to improve. In the Netherlands, we have relatively low residential segregation compared to international context. The strong role of the social sector with quite a broad scope of eligibility and a high standard of housing quality is key for this. And with regard to education, I can add that everyone has freedom to choose to which school you can go. So that also helps to prevent segregation. Then on citizenship education, I also already mentioned the reform of the curriculum, and the citizenship education part also contains the economic, social, and cultural rights in this convention, but also human rights in different other conventions. With regard to the Bonaire question, I had an email. I already mentioned that we have education agendas per island, and these are intended to work on improving education. So it's an agenda developed both by the Ministry of Education in the Netherlands and the local authorities, the school board. So the cooperation focuses, among other things, on recruiting and informing educational staff, professionalizing school boards, attention to multilingualism, maintenance of school buildings, and better progression to secondary education, and developing a vision on digital literacy. And final question was about digital accessibility of digital digital accessibility in education. Currently, there are no standards or norms in the Netherlands, and the EU legislation does not really help at the moment. But we are currently exploring which measures are necessary to guarantee accessibility of digital materials to each and every student, including students with disabilities. And schools, school boards, and corporations of schools have the responsibility to consider accessibility and specific accessibility questions for their population when purchasing education materials. And we provide subsidies to 2 foundations to provide education materials for dyslexic students and students with visual disabilities. I think that's so far for the questions. Thank you very much.
Continue with replies to the follow-up questions on cluster 4. And Marina Brillman from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, thank you for those questions from committee member Rossi. First on export of military goods, I would refer to the remarks yesterday that the only active license at the moment regards the export of components for the Iron Dome air defense system, and that no license is granted if there's a clear risk that military goods can be used in the commission of serious violations of human rights or international humanitarian law. With regards to the question more broadly about trade with Israel, as concluded in a letter to Parliament in December last year, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion of July 2024 justifies the continuation of Dutch policy, including the so-called dissuasion policy, that under that policy, the Dutch government dissuades economic relations with companies in illegal Israeli settlements in occupied territories. So the policy applies to activities of Dutch companies that contribute directly to the construction or maintenance of such settlements or directly facilitate the same. Nevertheless, in view of the continuing deterioration of the situation in the occupied territories, the Cabinet has decided to actively communicate about the dissuasion policy and is investigating whether the application of this policy can be extended. Additional measures, such as those affecting imports of products from the illegal settlements, are in principle a matter for the EU. The Netherlands is advocating for trade policy measures against the illegal settlements of Israel at the EU level, such as a trade ban or prohibitive import duties. In the meantime, the Netherlands is implementing national measures against goods from illegal Israeli settlements in occupied territories as soon as possible, in close coordination with like-minded countries. Regarding the question on the report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry, the report puts urgent questions about Israel's actions. The Netherlands takes reports of independent UN commissions seriously. We also do this with these findings. The report includes clear recommendations, some of which the Netherlands has called for some time, including the implementation of provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice. The qualification of genocide is before the International Court of Justice, And as confirmed by the Commission of Inquiry, that qualification is now for the International Court of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to address the question on international financial institutions. The Dutch government sees unsustainable debts as a risk to the global economy and therefore strives to promote sustainable debt levels. We note that the IMF and World Bank's analysis shows that low-income countries primarily face a liquidity issue rather than a debt issue. We support the three-pillar approach of the IMF and World Bank to firstly promote structural reform, for example, in tax collection, in order to reduce the need for external financing. Secondly, to ensure sufficient additional financing. And thirdly, to reduce the financing costs of existing debts. We also support initiatives to ensure that external shocks such as natural disasters are adequately considered in debt risk analyses.
To my knowledge, we have tried to answer the questions of your committee to the best of our availability. I want to check 1 second with my colleagues if anyone has anything to add on the